Don't listen to Joe Rogan about vitamin D. Thank you for watching and welcome back to my channel. For those of you who I've not had the pleasure of meeting yet, I'm Dr. Tom Cordell. I've been a doctor for over 20 years and it is my mission to help all of my patients and you live the longest, happiest, healthiest lives that you can. The body makes its own vitamin D naturally in the skin when it's exposed to sunlight. So on a fantastic sunny day like this, you make plenty of vitamin D on your own if you manage to get outside. The problem is, of course, is that in countries like the UK, which are in the Northern Hemisphere, don't get an awful lot of sun and are countries where we don't spend a lot of time outside, so people spend the majority of their day either in the house or in the office, we don't get an awful lot of sun exposure. So vitamin D deficiency is actually quite common in populations like the UK. Government guidelines recommend that all kids should take a vitamin D supplement and that all adults should consider taking a vitamin D supplement at least in the winter. However, there's very little evidence that vitamin D supplementation actually makes any significant difference to our health. Generally speaking, the evidence for vitamin D supplementation is really poor. So that begs the question, how did we get where we are today with podcasters like Joe Rogan waxing lyrical about the benefits of vitamin D and lots of doctors and scientists spending time on social media trying to get everyone to take vitamin D supplements by the bucket load? The answer, of course, is COVID-19. One of the things that we noticed with really sick patients in hospital with severe COVID-19 was that a lot of them had quite significant vitamin D deficiency. So it was posited that perhaps this was playing a role in either them contracting COVID-19 or becoming really sick with it. And then that's effectively been extrapolated across lots of disease groups to suggest that there's a role for vitamin D either in causing these conditions or making people who have these conditions more unwell. In fact, although COVID was the time when vitamin D really found its way into the popular consciousness, it's an issue that's been talked about in the medical profession for a couple of decades now. I remember when I was relatively newly qualified, vitamin D was being suggested as the panacea that could cure all ills. And so it's not something that's particularly new to us as doctors. We also regularly measure it in our patients, and so it's quite unusual for people to have undiagnosed vitamin D deficiency nowadays if they're someone who's been to see their doctor about anything in the last few years. But I know how much you guys like evidence, and I know that you don't want to spend money on snake oil supplements without knowing that actually there's going to be a benefit for you. So let's talk through the evidence in terms of what vitamin D can do for you. Now, at this point, it's worthwhile just having a little chat about the highest standard of medical evidence in terms of the effectiveness of treatments, and that is an RCT or randomized controlled trial. So this is a trial where a large group of patients are randomly assigned to either having treatment or placebo, so treatment or no treatment. And the important aspect of these trials is that they're blinded, so neither the patient nor the trial investigators, the people who are running the trial, know whether the patient has been assigned to the placebo arm of the trial or the active treatment arm of the trial. So it means that there can't be any bias introduced to the trial by either the patients knowing what drug they're taking or the investigators knowing what drug the patients are taking. So there are a number of relevant RCTs when we're talking about vitamin D, and they all show that there's no effect. Let me talk you through a few of them. A really nice one was the D-Health trial, which was looking effectively at all-cause mortality, so that's death from any cause at all in the study participants. They randomized the participants to taking either vitamin D at a dose of 60,000 international units a month, which is quite a high dose, but if you split it down to an equivalent daily dose, it's obviously only 2,000 international units a day, which is less than some people take in over-the-counter supplements. They followed up the study participants for a total of 5 years of treatment and found that in that time there was absolutely no difference in the rate of death between those people who took the vitamin D and those people who didn't. Interestingly, however, they did find that there was a slightly increased chance of getting cancer if you were taking vitamin D. So that raises the question, could vitamin D supplementation potentially be harmful? Another really helpful paper was a meta-analysis which was published in the Journal of the American Medical Association. Now, a meta-analysis is when researchers do a literature search and look at all of the available studies looking at a particular question, and then they assess how good those studies were, and then they amalgamate all of the data to come out with an overall answer to the question at hand. So this meta-analysis covered over 20 randomized controlled trials, which in total studied more than 83,000 people. And this showed that there was no reduction in cardiovascular events, so that's things like heart attack and stroke, in people taking vitamin D supplementation compared to those not taking it. Now, as cardiovascular disease is really common, this is a really important finding because it has great implications for our health. The other thing that was interesting about this particular meta-analysis was they looked at baseline vitamin D levels as well, and found that that had no bearing on whether or not you got any benefit from taking vitamin D supplementation. So even those people who were vitamin D deficient didn't get any significant benefit. And finally, getting back to Joe Rogan's favourite, which is the immune system and your ability to resist infections, a study that specifically looked at the rate of upper respiratory tract infections in patients taking vitamin D supplementation compared with those not taking it, found that there was absolutely no difference in the rate of those infections in the study population. So I guess that begs the question, why were we seeing this association between really low vitamin D levels in patients who are seriously ill with COVID-19 in hospital? And the answer to that probably lies somewhere along these lines. Basically, vitamin D is what we call a proxy marker for poor health. So by a proxy marker, we mean a flag, if you like, which is present alongside something else, but it's not actually related to that. So if you are of poor health, then you are far more likely to do badly from COVID-19, but you're also far more likely to do badly if you have a heart attack, or if you get pneumonia, or if you have a stroke, or if you develop cancer. So all of the common conditions that cause significant morbidity and mortality will be worse for you if you've got poor background health. Now, we know that the things that cause low vitamin D are being overweight, smoking, having a poor diet, not taking much exercise, and not getting outside very much. Now, those are all things which will cause you to be generally unhealthy as well. And if you're generally unhealthy and have a poor background health, then you're much more likely to do badly if you contract any serious medical condition. That brings us on to the final condition, which I think it's really worth taking vitamin D for, and that is rickets. Now, rickets is an ancient condition which has been observed for thousands of years in children, and it happens when kids don't get enough vitamin D when their bones are developing, causing misshapen bones. Now, it's really important that we understand that there is a proven link between vitamin D deficiency and rickets. So taking a vitamin D supplement as a kid is a really useful thing to do to prevent a serious condition, particularly as we know that vitamin D deficiency is actually relatively common in our Western society. So what would I do if I were you? In fact, what do I actually do? Well, what I do is I give my kids a vitamin D supplement because I don't want them to get rickets. I don't bother about taking vitamin D myself because it is absolutely proven beyond all doubt that it doesn't have any benefit, and in fact some studies have suggested that there might well be a slight disadvantage in terms of increased cancer rates. So unless you really want the D in you, don't waste your money on snake oil. Hope that's helpful. Thanks for watching. See you next time.